What's up? Welcome to Normal America Show. I'm your freshly trimmed host, robnoerr. What's happening? Hope you're all having a fantastic time. I am. You might notice I'm not at work. Yeah, wonderful. Oh, it's so nice not to have to work 140 hours a week. So I took vacation this week. Me and my wife and son and some people in her family went to lake here, Racetown Lake, and just got back Sunday evening and did some housework yesterday. Today we got some fun stuff planned later today. Hankster's taking a nap right now, my son, so I figured I'd come up and do a little streaming, let people know what my schedule is going to be here for the week, and sort of talk about some of the news of the day. So thank you, Vita. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. How's Hunter getting off this time? The same way they do every time. There's a two-tier justice system. Our FBI is corrupt, so no one of account will ever be held to a legitimate account. Do I change diapers? Yeah, I change diapers. I would say when I'm home, we're on like a 35% me, 65% my wife diaper changing schedule. Though I would say that the majority of the really messy diapers I get. She would disagree with that. But seeing as how I'm gone so much with work, she certainly does the bulk of the diapers, though. But you bet you could change a diaper faster than me? Probably. Speed's not something I'm known for, other than talking fast. But yeah, we had an exciting weekend of news and what have. Don't worry, though. It'll all be dropped soon. The mainstream media doing a great job of not covering it now. And soon Trump will be indicted for the third time and then the fourth time to follow. So that'll be occurring soon. So, right. Each situation. That's right. Prosecutorial, mens rea, prosecutorial discretion, blah, 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 says Peace Code, everyone. Why was Devon Archer's testimony closed door? Oftentimes the testimony is closed door of people that aren't necessarily whistleblowers. What I've read is that the normal process is that when they do a closed-door testimony like this, they then give the person who did the testifying a chance to read the transcript with his lawyers, and then they'll give a thumbs up on it, and then the transcript will be released. So that's the process that's supposed to occur. And let's be honest, everything we'll talk about today, it's important to recognize that everyone's going to be putting their spin on anything. So even people that I trust more, such as Jim Jordan, they're going to be putting their spin on it. Goldman, the Democrat, who was instrumental in the impeachment proceedings against Trump with Ukraine. Of course, he has skin in the game. He's going to be out there spinning it to make it look like the Bidens did nothing wrong. So I always like to look at the transcript for myself. The same is true of anything. You have to understand, myself too, I have bias. You shouldn't just take my word for something, right? I find that oftentimes when I read something like the Mueller report or the Durham report, or if I watch the IRS whistleblower testimony, the FBI whistleblower testimony, I see things that I don't see other people talking about. I think sadly, because our legacy media is so crappy, what ends up happening, well, they're just propagandists, but even people that I like, what often happens is the first story that someone puts out there, people just run with. And oftentimes there's important things I think that are missed. YouTube finally banned you for speaking the truth. Not surprised. I'll be banned eventually from YouTube. Yeah, ruminate, right? What a heck. You could have predicted it, right? At least he was honest in his hackery. Maybe we'll look through some of those tweets. He actually used the line I always used, right? Remember, I talk about this video a lot. To me, it was a seminal video when you had the Netflix trans people protesting Dave Chappelle's special being on there, and comedian showed up and he was holding a sign on a broomstick, and they smashed his sign so it was just a broomstick, and they yelled, "He's got a weapon." And the comedian's like, "Why are you doing this?" And they said, "Because you're awful." Right, that's the left in a nutshell. Anything is justified against you because they're morally superior to you. They feel you're awful. That's literally the words Ruminate used. The Republicans are awful. That's how he could justify these double standards. And that's the truth. That's the honest to God truth. That's how so many of them feel. They deep down know this is shady as shit what went on with Hunter Biden. Now, again, to me, Hunter Biden, my concern for him is here. Joe Biden, my concern with what... Thank you, 10 Goat. I appreciate the sub. 28 months. Wow. Thank you so much. You know, Joe Biden, because he is president and was vice president and senator, more concerned. But ultimately, the groups that I'm most concerned with are the institutions such as the FBI, and they're covering up. That's what the Devon Archer testimony really shows. And my takeaway from the testimony of if what's being reported is accurate, I think the most important thing is something that hasn't been highlighted so much by Jim Jordan and company. And so we'll talk about some of that today. Now, I would be remiss, I'll mention this several times. Apparently, left-wing streamer Destiny has a show called Kick or Keep. I don't know if it's his show or not. I do feel that because I always try to reciprocate, right? So you can see my sign back there. For my panel show, I had the arena. You see the list of all the people that participated on it. If any of those people would ever ask me to be on a panel show or a debate, I would say yes, because I feel that one of the things that's just polite to do is reciprocate. So if you ask someone, it's not that there's not benefits to both sides. For example, American Nacho, you can see his name up there. If American Nacho does my show, he's helping me out by giving me content and being a participant on my show. But hopefully I'm helping him out by providing him with a larger audience that may not necessarily have seen his material. And the same would be true of all those people up there. But I feel that the least I could do is if anyone there would ask me, hey, would you want to do my panel, that I would do that. So I don't know exactly what the situation is with this Kick or Keep show. I believe it's on Destiny's channel. I don't know. But seeing as how Destiny did do my panel show, I feel it would only be right to at least once do his panel show. Someone named Quantros or something. I don't know if that's Destiny's editor or someone that's working with his channel. I don't really know. They put a message out on Twitter that they were trying to discuss, they were looking for right-wingers to debate politics on this show this week, and I messaged them and said, sure, I would be interested, and, okay, so it's someone that Destiny's paying to be on the show. Whatever. I don't know much about this. What's going on outside here? We got some machinery business. Of course, once my son goes to sleep, and, So, that was supposed to be today at 6 o'clock. I believe that's been pushed back to tomorrow at 6 o'clock. So I know nothing about the show. I don't know anything about the topics. Yeah, so I'll be doing it tomorrow at 6 o'clock. I don't know. They just said the topic's going to be politics. That's it. That's all I know. So I don't know who's going to be on the show. I think it's one of those deals where the audience votes who to kick at the end of every round. I assume I'll be kicked quickly because the audience will be overwhelmingly left-wing, and they won't like me because I'll be telling them to eat shit, basically. So I'm sure the good centrist right-wingers will be kept longer. That's fine by me. I don't give a shit at all. Yeah, it's fine by me. I'll give them my peace of mind while I'm there, but that's okay. Here we go. Profound Clarity would love to see me do a piece on Ivanka's patent deals. Jared's $2 billion. Weird. Only Biden's corrupt. Isn't that weird? Don't you love these people? I always love this. So every major institution in this country, whether it be print news, whether it be academia, whether it be people in the entertainment industry, whether it be cable news, whether it be the traditional network news, whether it be the FBI or the Democrats that vastly control the conversation and the direction our narrative go, they constantly push for 7 years now? It's been Trump's corruption, Trump's corruption, Trump's corruption, Trump's corruption, Trump's corruption. And as soon as you use the same standard to go after people on their side, you get people like this. I will guarantee you that Profound Clarity isn't going on to shows such as Hassan's show or The Young Turks or Destiny's show or Pisco's show or Dylan Burns' show or whatever going, how come you never talk about corruption in the left wing? I'll guarantee he's not doing that. I guarantee he's not writing emails to the New York Times or to the Washington Post or to NBC. He's not doing that. I guarantee he's not contacting the FBI and going, how come you've leaked the details and focused on all this corruption of the Trump team, but not when it comes to the Hillary team or the Biden team, etc. Guarantee he's not doing that. But when there's some space, such as online spaces where independent people could do shows like I'm doing, they'll come on those shows and say, I would like if you do 50-50. Why don't you spend 50% of your time, right? I don't like that. Right. The same old talking points. Everyone who watches my show have seen these talking points over over and over and over and over again. Oh, I don't like Biden or Hillary either. Right, but they haven't spent any of their time going after the people that are far more influential than me, such as those at the network news areas and elsewise. They don't spend any time going to them and saying, why don't you do 50-50 split? Why don't you do a 50-50 split? They don't do that, right? And now you know why censorship is such a crucial part, by the way, of the left's agenda, of the establishment agenda, because they need to make sure that there aren't spaces like this that are pointing out the hypocrites, the corruption, and things like that that occur on their side. And so what they'll do is they'll rely on government censorship and social media censorship, and then they'll try to then influence you. And I talk about this all the time. Our greatest strength is our greatest weakness, in that we're not pathetic partisan hacks that are okay with anything corrupt that happens on our side. That's not who we are, right? And so they know that they could say, oh, but yeah, shouldn't you also talk about corruption on the other side? Because amongst everything else, what they really want is to make sure that you're not pointing out the obvious corruption on their side, right? So the audience chooses who to keep, and the winner chooses between the two with the least amount of votes, and that person's kicked off. Okay. Yep, sounds fine to me. I won't mind if I'm kicked off first. I really don't care. So there you have it. Profound clarity. Another establishment boot-looking goon pointing the exact same talking points that you constantly see. How many times in just last week when I was doing this debate, and in the weeks before that, right, when for example, I keep going back to this panel. I've illustrated this point over and over. When I was on the panel with Destiny and Dylan Burns and Brianna Wu, and Brianna says, oh, okay, I guess they should have got Hillary Clinton then. I guess they should have charged her then. My focus isn't on Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Donald Trump or George Bush or Barack Obama. My focus is on the institutions such as the FBI, because individual politicians will come and go. Those institutions will remain, right? And so what happens is someone like Profound Clarity will say, well, I don't like Biden. I don't like Hillary. Right, I don't like them, so, or what Brianna Wu did. I guess they should have been charged too. Right, then why didn't the FBI? See, it's not that they actually believe that. They just believe we hate Trump. We want him to go down for anything. We hate, and whoever, it's Trump now, but it'll be whoever is carrying the Republican or the populist torch moving forward. So it could be DeSantis or Vivek or Rand Paul. It doesn't matter. Whoever the most influential person in that space will be going forward. That's what their goal will be. They don't care. Yeah, now that it no longer matters, 5 years from now, they'll go, yeah, I guess Biden should have went down. Oh, well, he's not there anymore. Anyways, get the current person I don't like. That's where they'll be. And that's what's going on. So, Orange Man bad. Why aren't you just focused on Orange Man? Why aren't you focused on Orange Man? Yeah, I don't like Hillary either. But Orange Man, you need to focus on Orange Man. Sure, he's not the president right now. Joe Biden's the president right now, and we're talking about the corruption of him and how the FBI is covering up that corruption. But what about Orange Man? Isn't Orange Man bad? Weird that you're not talking about Orange Man. That seems odd. Orange Man's the only thing that matters in my life. So why aren't you solely focused on Orange Man? Well, you see, Profound Clarity, because I'm not someone who's willing to sacrifice my ideals and who I am and my integrity because I don't like one person. That's who you are. I get that. And I get that you would like to deflect from the corruption that we see through actual whataboutism, saying, I demand that you talk about these other people. But just to humor you, I will talk about them. Much like I don't care that Hunter Biden was using his dad's name for influence, I don't think that's a big issue, just like I don't care if he was doing drugs, just like I don't care if he was banging people and hookers and things like that. I don't really care about that. Even when I was on that panel and they were focused talking about Hunter Biden's gun crimes, I said, to me, it's not that big of an issue, except for the fact that the Secret Service and people connected to Washington may have helped cover him up. But the actual crime itself, I didn't really care about. I don't care that Jared and Ivanka or Hunter or Chelsea Clinton or any of these people are getting rich off their parents' names. Or kind of I do, but I understand that almost every major politician's family is doing that. I think it sucks. I think if we're going to go after one of those families, we should go after them all. What makes this different is the fact that it's been covered up by the FBI and we have provable interest of Joe Biden himself being involved in those business arrangements. For example, the business partner of Hunter and Jim Biden, Tony Bobulinski, said that the person that was getting 10%, that was the big guy, was Joe Biden. We know that they were working with corrupt entities, including, quote, the foreign spy master of China. That's in Hunter Biden's own words. We know that Joe Biden issued a quid pro quo using $1 billion, guaranteed tax dollars of your money, to force the firing of a prosecutor. We know that the FBI knew about this and still pushed for the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Those are the things that I'm concerned about. So when you could show me Donald Trump pushing a quid pro quo that the FBI covered up in order to enrich Jared Kushner, I will happily talk about how corrupt that is. Can you do that? Oh, wait. Now, isn't it funny when Trump was in office, and anytime they said things like, oh, Trump did this, he's corrupt. Trump said shithole countries, and you're like, well, actually, presidents have said stuff like that a lot. And they said, yeah, but he's not president right now. That's whataboutism. Trump's in office now. Isn't that weird how that standard changed? Trump's not in office now. That's Joe Biden. But I was like, but what about Jared Kushner? I don't give a shit. I don't like Jared Kushner. Throw his ass in fucking prison. If we decide today that we're going to arrest everyone under the FAR Act that didn't register as a foreign lobbyist, I'm all for it. Guess what? I'm from a small town. I'm a small country bumpkin. I don't know anybody who works in Washington, anyone. I think 90% of the whole system's corrupt. Fine. Great by me. I think there would be tens of thousands of people that have failed to register as foreign lobbyists, foreign agents. If we're going to prosecute them all, I have no problem. Why is it that we only go after Trump people? They got Manafort for it, but they didn't get who he worked with, which was the Podesta group. They didn't get Hunter Biden when he was clearly operating as a foreign agent, foreign lobbyist. Where you at, Profound Clarity? Where are you? Odd, isn't it? All they did, anytime I talked about it, they'd say January 6th, and I'd say, well, let's look at my focus has been on these institutions. Why was the FBI's treatment of January 6th so disparate from the treatment of the people that were rioting over George Floyd? Hundreds upon hundreds of times across this country in the summer of 2020, including outside the White House, trying to break into the White House, setting a Secret Service guard station on fire, attempting to break in and physically remove Donald Trump. Why was the treatment so disparate? And this is what I'm told anytime I bring it up by the left. That's whataboutism. That's all Rob has. Whataboutism. What about... And then when we're like, okay, Joe Biden's corruption, they're like, what about Jared Kushner? What about him? Didn't you just complain about whataboutism all the time? Well, this is different. Hashtag that's different. Democrats are good. You're awful. So it's different. So yes, now you see with the revelations that we see coming out. You see that, what about Jared Kushner? What about Ivanka? That's defense number one. Defense two, remember we went from Joe Biden never talked to his son about business dealings. Now we're to, well, of course, never talked to his business partners. Now it's, well, of course he did. They just talked about the weather. That's where we're at now. So, now, I have to say this is a precursor. I do want the transcript to come out. I do, of the Devon Archer testimony. Someone said, why is Devon Archer speaking up now? Well, because this is when he was called in front of the House. Because the FBI and serious Democrats that had control of the House and Senate before this didn't want his testimony coming out. They were more than happy for him to go to jail with financial crimes and then separate himself from John Kerry's son and from Joe Biden's son, and that would be the end of it. They were more than happy for that to be the case. But now that the Republicans are calling him in front, he probably feels that he doesn't want to get in more legal jeopardy, and he's probably a little irked. There's a text exchange that you could find between Devon Archer and and Hunter Biden, where Devon Archer's like, "Why are they coming after me and like not you? What's up with that?" And Hunter's like, "Oh, dude, democracy, bro. Like they're always coming after powerful people, So he's probably not too happy, seeing as how he's going to be left holding the bag, and the people he was working with, like, what's his name? Chris Hines, I think is the name of John Kerry's stepson, and Hunter Biden, They're going to get off scot-free, basically. Probably not sitting good in Devon Archer's craw. Maybe he sees something in it for himself. That, hey, if I cooperate, maybe there's a chance that I'll be given some sort of immunity deal. Nonetheless, there's always a chance that Devon Archer could be lying. That's true. It could be. But the issue has never been, are these, like, just like the 1023, is it possible, for those that don't know, it was released that starting in 2017, there was a confidential human source that the FBI trusted that they were talking to about the Burisma situation. That confidential human source then re-talked to the FBI in 2020 and said things such as Joe Biden was personally paid $5 million by Burisma's former owner and CEO Zlochevsky to force the firing of Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor. And that's why we're talking about this in the first place, because Joe Biden even publicly acknowledged that he issued a quid pro quo for $1 billion to force the firing of this prosecutor. That's what occurred. We know that's what occurred. That's the truth. I know that people like Destiny tried to say, just because Biden said that, maybe he was lying. Maybe that's the one time he was lying. Well, unfortunately for Destiny, we actually have audio of the Ukrainian president at the time, Poroshenko, saying to Joe Biden, we fired Shokin. We didn't have evidence of his corruption, but we fired him. And Biden's like, okay, now we could discuss the $1 billion. So this is beyond dispute. Thanks. You like that Destiny voice? It's beyond dispute. That's what happened. My standard from the get-go, and you can go back, you can see, I thought that I was better than any of the Republicans. In fact, I believe the first interaction I had with Destiny was talking to him about the Ukrainian impeachment stuff back in 2019 of Trump. My stance was always quite clear. It is clear that the standard in Washington set forth by the Democrats, the FBI, etc., is that it's okay to investigate your political opponents as long as you think there's a legitimate reason for doing so. And it's okay to issue a quid pro quo for U.S. tax dollars as long as you think that there's a legitimate reason to do so. If it wasn't, then Obama and Biden would be up shit's creek for investigating Trump and for issuing a quid pro quo to Ukraine. So they said, no, those quid pro quos, that was okay because it was for a good reason. That's what they said. And I said, given that, the impeachment of Trump makes no sense because if there was a legitimate reason for Trump to be asking for an investigation or cooperation with an investigation into Biden, Hunter Biden, and the firing of Viktor Shokin, then there's no case for impeachment. And I felt Republicans did a very poor job of articulating that. Maybe I'll go back. We'll see if we can find some of that. We'll go back and watch some of those, what I had to say. I haven't queued any of it up or anything. But maybe we'll go back and you could see what I was saying in 2019 and how frustrated I was about it. I've been talking about this Burisma stuff since 2018, 2019. Everything that I've said, we've found more and more evidence showing that I was correct the entire time. I went on shows like Adam and Sitch. I debated Pisco. I debated Destiny. I debated Dylan Burns. I debated dozens of people on this specific topic, on the Burisma stuff. And every small point that they were so certain of, we've seen more and more evidence come out that was incorrect. Every time. And the Devon Archer is the newest thing. The 1023 was the thing before that. Now, to me, and I'll say one more time, I want to see the transcript. I do. To me, the thing in the transcript that we're being told that was there, that I'm going to be looking for. Let me see if I can find this. Oh, now I have to go to x.com, right? This is what the House Republicans are putting, and I find this to be the most important thing. In December 2015, Zlochevsky, the owner of Burisma, and Pozarski, I'm sorry, butchering that name, an executive of Burisma, placed constant pressure on Hunter Biden to get help from D.C. regarding Ukrainian prosecutor Shokin. Shokin was investigating Burisma for corruption. Hunter Biden, along with Zlochevsky and Pozarski, called D.C. to discuss the matter. Biden, Zlochevsky, and Pozarski stepped away to make the call. This raises concerns that Hunter Biden was in violation of the Foreign Agents Registers Act. Now, one of the things that this shows, and it's absolutely legitimate, if Devon Archer said this, the claims that, well, all they talked about was the weather, well, that's not entirely true, because if Devon Archer testified to this, and that's a big if, but if he testified to this, then he's admitting he didn't hear what was said on that call. So he's with Hunter Biden and Zlochevsky and this other guy, and they call Joe Biden and then leave the room. Right? Hey, what's up, Randy West? I doubt that it was just about the weather. We'll get to that. But to me, the big focus on that point is this is devastating to the narrative that has been used as the singular excuse for Joe Biden's quid pro quo. Now, when I went on Sitch and Adams' show, the big complaint against me was that I'm biased. I am biased. That's true. I've talked about this quite often. All of us are biased. The key is to try to shrink how much influence that bias has on you when you're interpreting stories you see. You'll never be able to eliminate it. That's just the way it is. But your bias shouldn't influence you so greatly that you look at obvious corruption from people that you generally defend and say, I can't defend that. Now, I have a track record of, that's all right, I'll defend that. I have a track record of showing that I try at least many times to limit that bias, in that I voted for Donald Trump. I volunteered to help his campaign. And yet I've criticized him routinely and still do all the time. And say when I think he did things that are bad. I do that, right? Capriel says, do you think it's a base position to want to see all the criminals in prison, not just those you don't like? Not everyone is politically biased, so they're not influenced if someone is a Republican or Democrat. I think Trump is guilty, and I'm not a leftist. You're wrong. Everyone is biased to some degree, but that's okay. That's not something to be ashamed of. As I was just saying there, it's how much it influences you. The problem with this standard of thinking is that people oftentimes are, let's operate in good faith with you. I have no reason not to believe you're in good faith. 90% of the people in your alleged position here, I just want all guilt. No one's above the law, and I think Trump's guilty, so he should go down. All of a sudden, they have no problem when the other people that are obviously guilty, Hillary Clinton, the Podesta group, people in the Podesta group, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, etc., when the FBI chooses to not go after them. You're looking at it at this level. I'm looking at it at this level. So you're looking at it going, I think any individual should go down. I say, but what if the system tasked with taking those peoples down is in itself corrupt? My belief is that 90% of the people at the top levels of politics, or that are billionaires, etc., that are influencing our politics, are probably guilty of some sort of crime, whether it be financial, tax evasion, etc., etc. If we're going to have a system that says the most powerful investigative agency in the history of the world just picks and chooses which ones it spies on, goes through all their files, and charges them, they'll be able to influence the directive of our country in perpetuity, because they'll always be able to find crimes on the people they don't like. Even if they can't convict them of crimes, they'll be able to investigate them, hold them up in court, leak things to the press, ruin their chances, etc. You say just throw them all in prison if you have evidence to do so. The FBI doesn't do that. Now what? So in reality, the people that say, hey, I'm a centrist, I don't care about Trump or Hillary, throw them both in prison. When you say that in response to me pointing out the double standard and the corruption of the FBI, you're actually the best lapdog for that corruption that exists. Because unlike the people, there's this mass group of people in the center that you need to convince that either this isn't corrupt and yep, the FBI's doing whatever they should be doing and whatever they decide is good, or look, there's a blatant double standard here and they're using that to influence elections and the way our country grows. That's where the battle is. And if someone's like a rabid Hillary supporter and was like paid by Hillary Clinton, or is on Joe Biden's team, or, is on CNN, those centrist people probably are going to be like, well, of course this person's going to say that because they've been on that side the whole time. But it's the people like you that say, oh, I'm not on either side, but I'm perfectly fine. I think Trump's guilty. I'm perfectly fine with him going to jail. And I guess Hillary should have went to jail too. Oh, well, nothing happened. Moving on. You're actually the best tool for trying to convince people that this system isn't corrupt. So actually, I think what you're doing, I'm not saying you're doing it intentionally, I think we should just throw all corrupt people in jail, but it doesn't happen. The FBI just goes one direction after the people that they don't like, and I'm perfectly fine for that. I think that's actually worse. And you see this, and I'm assuming you're saying this in good faith. Constantly you see people arguing this in bad faith. No one ever gets thrown in jail for such as The Logan Act. Yeah. We can point to people that obviously were not members of the political group in power, the cabinet in power, that were contacting hostile foreign agents, but we've never arrested them under the Logan Act. One time it was charged in its 100 and something year period, and it wasn't a conviction. And yet they're going to go after Mike Flynn for it. And then people say, okay, just because they didn't go after people for this before, does that mean we shouldn't now? Okay, do it then. How about John Kerry? Well, they chose not to go after him. Same with FAR violations. Okay, we chose not to go after people previously, but now we're going to start with Paul Manafort because he's connected to Trump. Okay, well, he worked with Hillary's campaign manager, the Podesta Group. Well, we're not going to go after him. But that's okay, throw them all in jail. It's amazing how selective it is. And I go back to, the best analogy I could give is a racist police department. A racist police department decides it's going to only offer traffic tickets to black people. Now, you observe white people speeding at the equal rate as black people. It's 50% white area, 50% black area. And yet the police only go after the black people. And you say, but didn't those black people still speed? Well, yeah. Well, then they should be arrested. Okay, but isn't a bigger problem the racist police department? Well, I don't know. I'm just saying, then lock the white people up too. I don't care. Right, but they're not. Oh, well. Yeah, that's exactly right, Akbar. And that's what I heavily suspect. Now, again, you as an individual, I'm not saying you're operating in bad faith, but you have to understand the majority of people, and you're a dime a dozen that come into my channel and say this sort of thing, the majority of you are corrupt. You actually are trying to hide the fact that you just hate Orange Man so bad that you want him to go down, and you'll make any excuse whatsoever for the obvious double standard and corruption of the FBI and their effort to do that. So I don't take your comment very seriously. I just don't. Now, to me, what this, again, we'll go back to this. Oops. Zlochevsky, owner of Burisma, and Porzarski, an executive of Burisma, placed constant pressure on Hunter Biden to get help from D.C. regarding Victor Shokin. Shokin was investigating Burisma for corruption. Hunter Biden, along with Zlochevsky and Porzarski, called D.C. to discuss the matter. Biden, Zlochevsky, and Porzarski stepped away to make the call, raises concerns of whether Hunter was failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. FAR violation. And that's true. So the lesser thing that this does is it shows, remember, they went after Manafort for failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. This would be clear-cut case. And everyone knows. Hunter Biden was acting as a foreign lobbyist. He was lobbying for Burisma and Chinese interest, and I believe in Romania. He was. That's what was going on. Why hasn't he been charged by the FBI? They charged Manafort. Why not Hunter Biden? But the bigger story is, this is the defense that is given to the quid pro quo. Good. You don't feel like taking me seriously either. Well, thank you so much. See, and I love that. Now, I'll admit, I am a nobody. That's basically true. I mean, I'm probably one of the better conservative debaters or populist debaters that you see on these platforms. But, I mean, what do I have, 27 people up watching on Twitch where you're watching right now? It's true, I'm a nobody. But let me ask you, who's a bigger nobody? The nobody with 27 people watching? Or the nobody that feels that they're going to call that person a nobody, but comes on putting out hackery fucking, I'm a centrist, but I'm okay with the corruption. I just think they need to take Trump down. That's all I really care about. Who do you think's a bigger nobody? But I'll spare you this, since you think that I'm just a nobody. I tell you what I'll do. I'll spare you having to listen to me anymore or comment on it, and we'll just get you out of here. So thanks for playing. And there you have it. A literally nobody just kicked out a literal nobody who was commenting on a literal nobody's channel. So see ya. Now, the defense, let's go through what their story has been all along. Because what's been unique about this is we're comparing whether or not there's a double standard through investigators, our media, the FBI, etc., the State Department. Thanks, I will run down your mind. Thank you. Or I will run down mid. Thank you. We have two alleged quid pro quos. We have an alleged quid pro quo of Donald Trump. Now, Trump never said do X or you won't get money. But they say he implied that. And he implied that if Zelensky didn't cooperate with the United States and announce that they were investigating what went on with the firing of Viktor Shokin, that maybe there would be a holdup on some of the money. Let's just say arguably, I'll continue to defend this. That's less of an obvious quid pro quo than what Biden did. But for the sake of argument, let's call it a quid pro quo. So that was Trump's quid pro quo. That was impeachable. That was arguably a crime, says all of the Democrats, because that was for his personal gain. Then you have Biden's quid pro quo. Biden's quid pro quo said, if you don't fire Shokin, the prosecutor who's looking into my son's company, the company that my son's on the board of directors of, if you don't fire him, you won't get this money. Obvious quid pro quo. The defense of that is, but that was a good reason. That was for a good reason. That's what everyone in the US and the EU wanted anyway, so that's a good reason. And so they'll say, we could read Trump's mind. It wasn't that Trump wanted this done because he thought that first Biden quid pro quo was corrupt. It's that he only wanted to benefit himself. But Biden's quid pro quo was for a good reason. Now, this story made no sense from the get-go. People that say that have to assume, I guess, that Joe Biden doesn't give a shit about his son. Now, as horrible as I think that Biden is, and as corrupt as I think as his family is, I do believe he cares about his family and his son. This is the narrative, the defense that they've told you why this quid pro quo was legitimate. This is what they want you to believe. Actually, Shokin wasn't investigating Burisma. He wasn't. And so Joe Biden wanted the company that his son was on the board of directors investigated harder. That's what they told you. And so then he issues a quid pro quo, gets this prosecutor fired, and then it just so happens that his son, the investigation into his son's company just disappears. And all of a sudden he wasn't upset. And neither was the rest of the people in the EU that were upset about this. Isn't that odd? They're real upset that Burisma's not being investigated. We demand this prosecutor be taken out. And then the prosecutor gets taken out, and then Burisma's promptly allowed to go. And they're not like, we're still mad, we're upset. All of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, what can you do? That's what we're led to believe. Now, Shokin, the prosecutor that was fired, he claims, I was investigating. And I was also interested in personally investigating Hunter Biden. And I was told by the president, Poroshenko, Biden said that if you don't drop this investigation and if you don't stop looking into his son, we're going to have to let you go. And Shokin says, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Now, of course, the defenders of Biden will say, oh, no, Shokin's corrupt. We can't believe a word he says. It doesn't matter what Shokin says. He's corrupt. We don't believe anything he says. So it doesn't matter. So we can't look at any of that. It doesn't matter. I could sit here. I could interview Shokin. He could bring receipts for 6 hours. We could do an interview. And they'll say, he's corrupt. I don't believe any of that. Just erase that. So now we're operating in, okay, let's take Shokin's words out of it. And let's just go with the story that you've given. And that's where we've been. And I'll say, well, here's what we know. Shokin froze assets in early February 2016. And then almost a week or two after that, Blue Star Strategies, that were the lobbyists in the United States for Burisma and for Zlochevsky, reached out to the Obama-Biden State Department. And they sent an email that basically said, hey, Hunter Biden works here. We'd like to talk to you about, the corruption investigation. And then within a week or two of that interview, Joe Biden gets on a plane. He goes to Ukraine in early March of 2016 and issues his famous quid pro quo where he says, if you don't fire that son of a bitch, we're not giving you your money. And son of a bitch, wouldn't you know it, they fired him. That's what we know. That is beyond dispute. That's the timeline of things. That's what happened. And so then when you hear me debate, most of the people say, nah, there was no investigation. When you bring up that the assets were frozen, the best they have is someone like Pisco that'll go, well, but that was just like a technicality. The freezing of the assets was just a technicality. Well, wouldn't that technicality show that there was something going on in this investigation? I mean, if Shokin was corrupt and was covering up, wouldn't he have not gone through with that technicality? And furthermore, I'm supposed to believe it's just a coincidence. That's when Blue Star Strategies sends the email, like a week after that. Basically, within a month of those assets being frozen, Joe Biden's on a plane in Ukraine saying, fire this prosecutor. This is the final straw. I'm supposed to believe that's a coincidence. That's what I'm supposed to believe. And it's also coincidence that when they fire him, the investigation is basically buried. And it's also coincidence that Biden and Obama and the EU and all these places that wanted Shokin fired because he wasn't investigating Burisma, all of a sudden they didn't have anything to say about it after that. Just all big coincidence. Yeah. Boy, if we find out that actually Shokin was investigating, all of a sudden all those claims but everyone in the EU and the United States wanted Shokin fired, that takes on a different slant, doesn't it? I wonder why they wanted him fired. Either they're dolts and thought that he was corrupt and not investigating Burisma and they were wrong, or they were in on it all along because it was a huge money laundering scheme, just like it is right now with the billions we're sending to Ukraine. What's up, Roland? Great to see you. So that's been their defense. Then we had the 1023. It's like, okay, well, now we have a confidential human source saying that Joe Biden was personally paid $5 million to pressuring Shokin get fired. And what's the left's response to that? We don't have any proof that guy was telling the truth. We don't know anything about that. Well, my stake is that I will fully admit that person could be lying, or Zlochevsky could have lied to that person, and then they were telling the truth. The question is, my standard from the get-go, let's go back here. My standard from the get-go has always been this. Anytime a high-level politician in this country uses your tax dollars in a quid pro quo to force the firing of a prosecutor who's looking into a company that their family has connections to, there ought to be an immediate independent investigation. That's it. That seems to be a pretty consistent stand. I don't give a shit if your name's Trump, if it's Bush, if it's Cheney, if it's Biden, if it's Clinton, if it's Obama. It is irrelevant. We cannot have a country where our executive branch authorities that have control over this money is issuing quid pro quos to get prosecutors fired that, at least on paper, are directed at looking into their families' companies. You can't do that. There needs, and it's not good enough to have the agencies that those people have control over do the investigation, as we've seen with the corrupt FBI time and time again. That's the truth. But no, they said, no, this was perfectly legitimate. It was legitimate. So that we had the 1023. Now, and this is the meat of why I'm doing this video, we have Devon Archer's testimony. And Archer said a lot of stuff. Hunter Biden called him my guy. That this Biden was the brand for Burisma. And without Biden, they would have collapsed. All that's interesting and worth talking about. But to me, the thing that not many people are focused on that is the real damning thing is, if the defense of Joe Biden's quid pro quo was, but Shokin wasn't investigating Burisma anyways. Because the entire allegation is this. We know without a doubt that people at Burisma or their lobbying firm were contacting the Obama-Biden State Department. We also have it alleged that they were making phone calls to Joe Biden through Hunter Biden. We know through emails that they were pressuring Hunter Biden and other people to do what they could in the United States to get this corruption allegation buried. That's beyond dispute. We know that's true, which just makes sense. Of course that's what they're doing. So given that, the allegation that I'm making of potential corruption is, you got these people at Burisma. The Obama-Biden administration has been saying for a long time, we think they're guilty, we think they're corrupt. Joe Biden's son starts working there. There's this prosecutor that's allegedly leading the investigation. They forced the firing of that prosecutor, but their defense is, oh, that looks bad on paper. It looks bad that this guy was investigating the vice president's son's company, and we said, nah, fire him. And then once he was fired, the investigation was promptly buried. That looks bad, but the reason it's not bad is because that investigator actually wasn't investigating Burisma. Actually, Burisma wanted that investigator to stay there because he was covering up for them. And now we have from Devon Archer's, if it's true, and there is dispute of this, but if it's true that Devon Archer said they were pressuring Hunter Biden to call D.C. because they wanted something done about Victor Shokin. For 5 years now, the defense of, but Shokin wasn't doing anything. All of that out the window. Because you know who it matters most, what they thought, if Shokin was doing something or not? Burisma and their one-time owner and CEO, Zlochevsky. That's who it matters the most. See, let's simplify this. If I am the target of an investigation, and I think the prosecutor investigating me is on the take for me, and he's covering up for me, I'm bribing him, he's covering up for me, I don't want that prosecutor fired. I want him to remain in the position he's in because he's covering up for me. But if I think that that prosecutor is actually investigating me, I may want that prosecutor fired. So if I have these people hired that their job is to spread influence to get what I want done, I'm going to tell them, use your connections to get this prosecutor out of here. Now, it doesn't matter what the prosecutor was actually doing. If I, as the target, think that he's coming after me, one, it probably shows that I would know that he is actually coming after me. But second, that's irrelevant anyways. All that matters is I think, and therefore I say I want to pressure people to get this guy fired. The transcript's supposed to be released within a week. We'll see, though. Now, I argued on Twitter today with Pondering, aka Ruminate, I don't know why he changed his name, and Pisco, who I did a panel with a week and a half ago on Counterpoint's channel on this very topic. And of course, their defense was, nuh-uh, Shokin wasn't really investigating. And I said, okay, if this testimony is accurate, if Devon Archer said, actually, Zlochevsky and Burisma wanted Shokin fired because they thought he was investigating them, then all of that defense of, oh no, but he actually wasn't, that's out the window, right? That no longer matters. It doesn't matter if you think Shokin was investigating Zlochevsky. What matters is Zlochevsky thought that Shokin was investigating Zlochevsky, which is why he may have used his connection, someone on his payroll, Hunter Biden, to contact people in the U.S. State Department, including his father, to pressure them to fire Shokin, which, by the way, is exactly what happened. Have I tried going on Sitch and Adam to talk about Biden impeachment? I was on there before. Adam treated me like an asshole the whole time. Sitch became a crybaby after he kept calling me bias, and I said that actually he has bias as well and threatened to kick me off the show. I would still be happy to go back on, and now in light of new information that's came about, would be happy to talk to them again. Why do I think the left is so disingenuous? Because they believe they're morally superior to you, so all tactics are justifiable. The ends always justifies the means. So they don't give a shit. They've convinced themselves as good people that anything people are doing at the behest of their side must be a good thing. That's why. So when I brought this up, to Ruminate/Pondering's credit, he was like, yeah, that would look bad. But not Pisco. Pisco says, well, let's hold our horses. If Devon Archer testified to that, that still wouldn't mean blah, blah, blah. It's laughable. Again, as I've said about Pisco the entire time, you would literally need, like, notarized statements. You know, it's like the old Chappelle Show skit where, you know, Chappelle's the juror, and they're talking about if R. Kelly's guilty. He's like, of, you know, inappropriate sexual actions with underage people. He's like, all right, I'd need the video of him peeing on the girl, and then I'd need 2 notaries that were there, and his mom there to sign a statement, and I'd need R. Kelly's sworn signature. Like, that's where Pisco's at. Yeah, that's exactly right, Imaginarium. That is. I don't know that it's not that they're leftist, and I explained this to Sitch. I'm not accusing Sitch's bias of being pro-Democrat. That's not what I'm doing. I'm accusing his bias of being pro-establishment. In other words, he will believe what the FBI tells him the majority of the time. So I'm accusing the FBI of being corrupt or engaging in a double standard, and I'm outlining a bunch of reasons of why. Particularly, we spend a lot of time talking about Burisma and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and I'm outlining it, and basically he's like, we'll see what the FBI eventually says. We have to wait for more information. And I'm basically like, but that's because your bias is to defend the FBI and what they say, because you think it would be absurd that they could be acting with this sort of corruption. And so that's what will happen. Their worldview depends on that. It does. You know, what's the use for it? And his bar for making evidence very high is selective, though. There are certain things that it's not the case. So I don't know. I don't watch their show routinely, but I'll bet their bar for Trump being guilty of some of the things he's been charged for. I know that he was okay when it came to the Steele dossier. But with some of these charges, I bet the bar for evidence isn't that high there. But nonetheless, maybe I'm wrong. Right, my neighbor guy, right. So we'll see the transcript. Now, to be fair, Representative Goldman, Democrat, he was a guy who was an attorney. He's from the Levi Strauss fortune, accused of shady portfolio dealings to enrich himself. He was one of the people instrumental in the first impeachment of Trump based on Ukraine. So clearly he has skin in the game. He came out and said, actually, this claim that Devon Archer testified that there was a call that they were pressuring Hunter Biden to get a hold of D.C. to do something about Victor Shokin. He claims that's not the case. Or actually, he didn't say that, which was clever. He said that Archer said that Shokin was under the thumb of Burisma. So we have two competing interpretations, which is why we need to see the transcript. I'm always for releasing this stuff, regardless if it's a transcript of stuff that accuses Trump of wrongdoing or people surrounding Trump or accusing Biden of wrongdoing, whatever. More information's good for me. Release it. But the two competing interpretations are this. On one hand, you have Republicans that are saying on this particular issue that Zlochevsky and Burisma executives were pressuring Hunter Biden to do something about Shokin, which is exactly what happened. His dad did something about Shokin. And then on the other hand, you have Goldman saying, no, Burisma thought that Shokin was in the bag for them, so they wouldn't have wanted him fired. Now, let me be clear here. If it turns out that Republicans have lied, that Devon Archer never did testify, that Zlochevsky and this other Burisma executive said we're talking about Shokin and wanted something done about Shokin, if that's a lie, and Republicans literally just made that up, I will call them out in the harshest possible language. That is such a specific thing to lie about that will obviously be able to be disproven. They're not talking in vagaries or abstractions. They're not saying, oh, and Archer said that he thought Zlochevsky thought that Shokin was out to get him. And then you read the testimony, it's like, well, maybe, maybe not. They're saying they were telling people to get a hold of DC to do something about Shokin, and there was a specific call. Why would you make that up? They may have. The Republicans may have made that up. We'll see. Hopefully the transcripts gets released. But why make it up? So for 3-4 days, you could spin a story that no one on the left's going to listen to anyways, that the New York Times isn't going to cover, that the CNN's not going to cover? When actually, Archer testified to almost the exact opposite? Now, what Goldman's, you might say, well, why would Goldman make up what he said? Well, what Goldman said could theoretically still be true while also what the Republicans said being true. So it could be that Goldman lied. His is far less specific. He's saying Archer testified that Shokin was under their thumb. And I'll play the clip. Here's the clip that Ruminate sent me of Goldman, again, who has skin in the game, because if it turns out, right, remember, as I've been saying since the first impeachment of Trump on the Ukraine thing, if there was reason to look into this, if there was corruption, if Burisma was reaching out to the State Department and using Hunter Biden to influence his father to force the firing of Shokin, then Trump was well within his rights. All you have to do is listen to what the defense of Biden's quid pro quo. Well, if Biden's quid pro quo was trying to root out corruption, so it's okay. Okay, then if Trump's quid pro quo was trying to root out corruption, and now we see that there was actual corruption, then it was okay. And as always, just like with the Russia collusion investigation, the investigation is designed to accuse Trump of what they themselves have done. That's what's going on. They were corrupt with Ukraine. They issued a quid pro quo with Ukraine, and so they investigated Trump for investigating that, thereby shielding themselves, turning their weakness into their offense. Now, instead of the conversation being around their corruption in Ukraine and their quid pro quo, it's around Trump's. And so they get away with it. Here's what Goldman had to say. I know the volume's not working. Come on, go away. Let's try again.
And Devon Archer, the witness today, said that Burisma, on whose board he sat with Hunter Biden, did not want that prosecutor general fired because he was, quote, under their control, unquote. So the only official action here that is at issue actually went counter to what Hunter Biden's business interests might be. And Devon Archer, the witness today.
So he's saying that it's the opposite. That Devon Archer testified that Burisma didn't instruct Hunter to reach out to his father to do something about Shokin, because actually Shokin was on their team. Now, it is possible that they could have felt that at one point. They could have said at one point, we think Shokin's helping us, and then later said, uh-oh, and then said, we want you to contact your father and do something. So it's possible that Devon Archer said both of these things. All that matters is when this phone call was made, what were they thinking at that time? If what the Republicans said is true and what Goldman said there is true, it's devastating for Biden, because it shows that the very people that we know were using his son as leverage, that's admitted by all sides, wanted Victor Shokin removed. Yes, they should have talked to Victor Shokin. They should, but they won't. So we'll see if the transcript's sent out. But what's telling is, as always with these things, watch the response of people that don't know if it's true or not and see how they're reacting. So, for example, Bisco. Bisco says, name a goalpost shift. I say, can you explain why Zlochevsky wanted Shokin fired and was pressuring DC to make it happen if Shokin wasn't investigating Burisma and Zlochevsky? And Ruminate says, this claim's contradicted. I said, I guess we'll see. Republicans reporting Archer testified to the exact opposite. Will you admit, if this testimony is accurate, that it shows the excuse for Biden's quid pro quo that Shokin wasn't investigating Burisma to be garbage? And here's what Republicans are saying. Archer said Zlochevsky and Pozarski, who again is the Burisma executive, placed constant pressure on Hunter Biden to get help from D.C. in getting Ukrainian prosecutor Victor Shokin ousted. Shokin was investigating Burisma for corruption. According to the source, Archer testified that in December 2015, Hunter Biden, Zlochevsky, and Pozarski called D.C. to discuss the matter. Archer testified that Biden, Zlochevsky, and Pozarski stepped away to make the call. So I said, if that testimony is accurate that I just read, would you admit that the quid pro quo defense of Biden that Shokin wasn't investigating is garbage? Ruminate says, if the Fox interpretation of Archer's testimony is accurate, it would be evidence which contradicts the claim that Shokin wasn't investigating Ukraine. which also is that's bullshit. But he's basically saying, yeah, that would look bad. Pisco says, yeah, no. Just because Archer says it doesn't make it true. It would be some evidence that Shokin was investigating Burisma or people close to Burisma. And I said, and here we have it. Even if Zlochevsky and Burisma executives are saying they want Shokin gone, that still won't be enough evidence for Pisco and your defense of Biden's quid pro quo that Shokin wasn't investigating Burisma. Truly astounding. And then Ruminate says, the claim Shokin wasn't pursuing Burisma is also supported by evidence. If Archer says otherwise, it's a contradiction, not an auto-debunk. And there he puts an article from 2019. Biden allies pushed out Ukrainian prosecutor because he didn't pursue corruption charges. And here's his proof that Shokin wasn't investigating Burisma. You ready? Here's Ruminate's proof. Quote, here's what he highlights. But sources ranging from the former Obama administration officials to the anti-corruption advocate in Ukraine say the official, Viktor Shokin, was ousted for the opposite reason Trump and his allies claim. It wasn't because Shokin was investigating a natural gas company tied to Biden's son. It was because he wasn't pursuing corruption among the country's politicians, according to a Ukrainian official and 4 former American officials who specialize in Ukraine and Europe. Oh, okay. So then a Ukrainian and the Obama team thought, no, we think he wasn't. And that's proof enough for Ruminate. Now, as I say, and this is the last I'll show of this, but as I tell Ruminate then, I say, again, this is a lie. Shokin froze assets for Burisma CEO and founder Zlochevsky in February 2016. Within a few weeks, Burisma's lobbyists were setting up a meeting with the Obama-Biden State Department, mentioning Hunter Biden worked for them. Then within weeks of that, Biden's quid pro quo got Shokin fired. But you know all of this because of the panel we were just in. You're just ignoring it because it doesn't fit your narrative. And it doesn't matter. This is something that these people do over and over and over. You've seen it if you followed my channel a lot. You'll see someone come on and they'll say, Donald Trump told people to drink bleach. He told them to drink bleach. And I'll be like, no, he didn't. He did not tell them to. Prove it. Show me where they said to drink bleach. Let me find it. Here's the quote. Right. In that quote, he mentions that there are possible disinfectants that could be ingested. And that's true, such as light is a disinfectant. UV light's considered a disinfectant. In addition to that, there are many other medicinal disinfectants, pills, injections that you could take that aren't bleach. Well, he clearly meant bleach. Why would he mean bleach when it was evident that he was talking about this UV light right before then? In addition, why would you assume that the person was talking about bleach when there are medicinal disinfectants? And you're the one making the claim that he told people to drink bleach, so shouldn't you prove it? Well, he said Nazis were good people. No, he didn't say Nazis are good people. Would you like to show me? Here, let's go through the... And then the next day you see them and they're saying, Donald Trump said Nazis were good people and to drink bleach. That's what Donald Trump did. It's over and over and over. You debunk this shit, they don't give a fuck about the truth. I did a whole panel with Ruminate and Pisco and Counterpoints. We heavily talked about these frozen assets. Ruminate heard all of it. He sat there and listened to it. And yet still he acts as if that conversation never happened. Well, here's 2 sentences from people in the Obama team saying, "Nuh-uh, we don't think Shokin was investigating corruption." So that's credible evidence. It's just absurdity after absurdity with these people. So we'll see. Someone's going to look like a damn fool when this transcript comes out. And I'm telling you right now, I'll call it out if it was the Republicans. If the Republicans are lying, and they were never, Zlochevsky and Burisma, Archer never testified that they were suggesting that they wanted Shokin ousted or that they needed to do something about Shokin and that they were encouraging Hunter Biden to make a phone call about it, I'll call that shit out. But if it was Goldman, do you think the left's going to call it out? Just like Adam Schiff went on about the Russia collusion shit over and over and over and over again, went on TV. He's still doing Anderson Cooper's show. He'll still go on CNN. He'll still go on MSNBC. He'll still get quoted in the New York Times, blatantly lying again and again and again. Democrats don't give a shit. Well, Pisco's pivot will be, if the testimony says that maybe Devon Archer's lying to save himself. That'll be his pivot. Maybe the confidential human source lied. Maybe Devon Archer's lying. Maybe Tony Bobulinski's lying. Remember, my standard the whole time is none of this proves the guilt of Biden. But remember, the group that I'm most interested in isn't Biden. It's the FBI. And this is the mistake people are making, because at the end of the day, if the impossible happens and there's enough public outrage to force some sort of accountability, they'll just bury Biden. That's what they'll do. I still predict that the way this ends, inevitably, there's a 50-50 shot. In fact, probably a 70-30 shot. 70% chances that no one's ever held accountable and the news cycle moves on and we talk about Trump. But the 30% chance is if there's enough public outrage, what'll happen will be Biden will issue some sort of pardon for his son and he won't run again, which is what they want anyways in 2024. They would rather it be Gavin Newsom. That's not the end goal for me. Because if no one's held accountable at the FBI, nothing changes. Then you get Gavin Newsom and the same corrupt FBI. The real question to be asking here is, if this is what Devon Archer told the House Oversight Committee, this means that the FBI could have accessed this information, and probably did, way back in 2016, 2017. Why didn't they? And if they did, why was nothing done about it? Remember, they got FISA warrants to spy on the President of the United States. They sent literal spies to talk to people on his team, like Stephen Halper, to talk to Papadopoulos, off of far flimsier evidence that they knew was sourced by his opponent. But Devon Archer, the best friend of Joe Biden's son, saying, these people were pressuring him to fire Victor Shokin, and we know that Victor Shokin was fired. Why didn't the FBI do anything about it? Why weren't there wiretaps? Why weren't there spies sent in? Why hasn't there been a FARA violation? Why hasn't there been some sort of accountability? Why instead does it seem that 51 former officials that worked at these intel agencies were saying the contents of the laptop that were leaked right before the election were clearly Russian disinformation? Why do we see that people at the FBI and other agencies were instead contacting social media saying, the Hunter Biden, this disinformation that's going to come out, it's disinformation and you should censor it. I wonder why. And the FBI will say, our investigation's still ongoing. And this is just one plank of it. Remember, we didn't get a chance to talk. The last time I talked to you was right before Hunter Biden's plea deal that fell apart. Did you see that shit show? Where the DOJ tried to quietly give a super sneaky pardon to pardon Hunter Biden for all of this shit that he did. Two things happened when it came to criminal cases this week. I forgot that I haven't talked to you since then. This insane shit show of egg on the face. Literally, you had the DOJ when the only thing that stopped this from occurring was a judge that gave a shit, right? I'll just go through it to the best of my knowledge because it is complicated. But basically, here's what happened. You had the plea agreement, but then you had this diversionary agreement that's sort of a background thing. The plea agreement has to be read by the judge, right? And the judge has to agree to accept the terms of the plea agreement. But this other agreement that was sort of behind the scenes, the judge doesn't really get a chance to accept those terms or not. And so the judge says to the DOJ, wait a minute, his gun crimes and things like that, why are they being tied up in this plea deal for tax charges? Can you show me where that's ever happened like this? And the DOJ's like, no. So this is a first of its kind incident. At least as far as the DOJ is concerned. They can't think of another incident. But we're not supposed to believe that there's special treatment. So then when the judge is like, okay, so does this mean that he has blanket immunity for any of these charges? Here's my belief what happened. That's exactly what the intent was, that the DOJ, they just knew, because these whistleblowers came out, they knew that it would be a very bad look if they come out just a couple weeks later and go, yeah, Hunter Biden has immunity for everything, with the exception of this small slap on the wrist he's getting. They knew that would be a bad look. So instead what they tried to do was write this up in a way where on paper it looked like what the judge would have seen, what me and you would have seen that would have been released would have looked like, oh, we're just giving him, it just pertains to this tax charges. And then they would have been able to say, but there's still an ongoing investigation into other things, which they in the end would have declined prosecution because that's what they told Hunter's team in private. And it would have carried out until after the election. So anytime Congress would have pulled them in front of oversight, they would have said, we can't discuss that. It's an ongoing investigation. That's what they're still saying about the Burisma shit that occurred in 2016. Ongoing investigation. Can't talk about it. I didn't see Scott Adams' analysis of it, but I'm sure it was good. So that's what was going on. Meanwhile, while this was happening, you also had Sam Bankman-Fried, the biggest donor other than George Soros to the Democrats, who scammed people out of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. His campaign finance charges were dropped, allegedly because the Bahamas government wouldn't extradite him on these charges. All of a sudden, our prosecutor, if the Bahamas says it, then what can we do? Now, what do these two things have in common? Well, connections to the Democrats make Democrats look bad. There's something more specific. See, they don't give a shit if Hunter Biden inevitably goes down for failing to pay his taxes. And they don't give a fuck if Sam Bankman-Fried goes down for embezzlement and shit like that. They're unconcerned with that. Because at the end of the day, they could cut ties and just say, well, and they'll spin it to their benefit. See, when people on our side do something corrupt, we hold them accountable. No, you don't. It's only because of the public outrage, the whistleblowers, things like that. But the reason those specific charges came out, the immunity and all this shit over here with Hunter Biden, and the campaign finance charges with Sam Bankman-Fried, is because both campaign finance, and here's the big one with Hunter Biden, FARA violations. That's really bad for the Democrats. That's really bad for Biden. Want to know why? Because it implicates who was the campaign finance violations to? Oh, to the Democrats. Who was the FARA violation? There was illegal lobbying going on. Who was that lobbying occurring to? Oh, to Biden. That's why they had to cut. Yeah, I think it does. It could possibly as well, Vita. 30% chance. That's ultimately why those are the charges that they're trying to avoid at all costs. Yeah, get Hunter for, hell, they'll, even if they have to, they'll charge Hunter for the gun crime. But they do not want to charge him with FARA. Because if he was operating as a foreign lobbyist, the obvious question, and this is the problem that no one understands with lobbying. I don't give a shit about foreign lobbying. I don't. Or rather, I wouldn't. Why is lobbying bad? And it's a fundamental disagreement I have with big government people. They'll say, this is what they say. How many times have you heard the left say this? Well, we need more government oversight and regulation and things like that because here's what happened. These big businesses, they influence our government because they're lobbying and they're spending all this money to get things that they want. And that means that we need to get money out of politics. And my response is, the reason they're spending that money is because government is big enough to issue winners and losers. And so they know, well, if I lobby my senator, this will make sure that there are loopholes in the regulation that will affect my opponents, but not me. And then I stand to benefit. The problem with lobbying, the real reason that we hate it, is because people are getting undue treatment because of the money they're giving. I wouldn't much give a shit. Like, let's say Achilles here. Right, in the chat. Let's say Achilles is running for Senate. And I know Achilles. And I know Achilles hates Pfizer. Doesn't like him. I don't know this, but just say hypothetically I know this. Achilles hates Pfizer and is like, runs on the promise like, if I get elected, we're criminally investigating Pfizer for things surrounding the vaccine. That's what we're going to do, right? And Pfizer donates $100 million to Achilles. And Achilles says, thank you very much for money, and now I'm still going to investigate you. Sure, I'll take your money and help win, and then I'm going to investigate. I don't give a shit about that because the money didn't buy influence. They may have intended for it to buy influence, but it didn't work. I don't really care. The problem is if Achilles says, I'm going to investigate Pfizer, and then Pfizer gives him $100 million and he goes, well, I've changed my mind. That's the problem because then it speaks to, oh, the buying of influence worked. That's the problem. So when we see lobbying that Hunter Biden, right, because the defense that's being offered is, well, he was selling the illusion The illusion of influence. He wasn't selling influence, he was selling the illusion of influence, right? And so therefore, and why is that important? Well, one, that doesn't get him out of the question of then why wasn't he charged as failing to register as a foreign lobbyist? Because that's still lobbying. But secondly, isn't this a coincidence? This is what we're being told, right? That you got, Zlochevsky and Burisma are talking to Hunter Biden and they're like, hey, your dad? And he's putting his dad on the phone. He's like, hey, here's dad. And they're like, yeah, we want you to pressure your dad, But he wasn't really able to pressure him. Well, then isn't it a little coincidental that Joe Biden did exactly what Zlochevsky wanted? If Zlochevsky wanted Shokin fired, and they said, Hunter, call your dad, we want Shokin fired, and Hunter calls his dad, and they're just like, hey, how about the weather? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, within a couple months, Biden's issuing a quid pro quo to get Shokin fired. We're supposed to believe that's just a coincidence. It's an absolute coincidence. They thought, so they're paying Hunter to get influence to Joe Biden. Hunter's unable to deliver. He's just pretending. But it just so happens Joe Biden did everything that Zlochevsky wanted. That's what we're being told. That's the argument here. We also know there was this Russian woman who was paid like $30 million or something like that to the Bidens, we now know. She was one of the only Russian oligarchs not sanctioned by Biden. Yes, Devon Archer, Hunter's friend, was under oath when he testified, I believe, in front of the House committee. That's what this was about. The sweetheart plea deal to Hunter, it's all about getting rid of any possible connection to Joe Biden doing any wrong. At the end of the day, if worse comes to worse and they have to charge Hunter Biden with, sexual assault or something that would carry a serious jail term, they could live with that. What they can't live with is the connections to the DC establishment. They can't live with the connections. The FBI can't accept that. So that's what that was about. It's the same with Sam Bankman-Fried. Well, okay, he defrauded his investors. And that's serious. If you opened up the New York Times, well, the serious charges are still there. He defrauded the investors. Right. And who did it benefit? Who was he sending a bunch of illegal money to? Oh, the Democrats. But some Republicans too. Cool, let's see them. You think it was Trump? Or do you think it was people like Mitt Romney? Yep. I'm sure he was sending it to establishment rhino-type Republicans. Fuck it. Yeah, let's see their names too. Totally cool with it. I don't even give a shit if you send it to Trump. Let's see that too. I don't give a shit. If it's illegal, it's illegal. Isn't that funny? When it comes to the people in Washington being implicated, those charges are always mysteriously forgiven or dropped. Unless your name's Trump or someone connected to Trump. That's right, kingdoms and kobolds. Under oath means nothing if they're not prosecuted. You can't take money out of government completely. There was a debate between Cenk and Ben Shapiro years ago, right? And I thought it was interesting because I spun it off into a bigger topic, right? Let's say we take money out of politics. Let's do that, right? And so no more money in politics. No one could donate to anyone. So when you're running, there's one of two ways to do this. You decide to run for office. There is a pool of money that is collected through taxation that you then have access to that pool of money to use for your campaign, or you're only allowed to use your own money. Okay, let's say it's the latter then. You're only allowed to use your own money. So right out of the way, someone like me, never able to win an election, ever. Because someone who's a millionaire will be able to outspend me, so I lose. So already, you've still have a filter on who gets from office. Second, it's impossible to stop. There will always be ways, such as, let's say I run for office and I'm not accepting any money, but I happen to be an awesome artist. I'm an awesome artist, so I'm running for Congress, and I'm gonna sell a picture here. Oh, there's my picture. Oh, and Pfizer just paid me $5 million for that picture? Cool. So there's infinite ways to get around it. So you're not going to be able to get money out of politics. Thirdly, and most importantly, let's say we do get money out of politics. Okay, but let's say that CNN and the New York Times and MSNBC and Twitter and Facebook and Google, and they all decide they're going to push one candidate. Not money, mind you, just with their coverage. That's still the bulk of the problem. Hank probably does draw better than me. And that's what Cenk and Ben Shapiro are arguing about. Cenk's like, we need to get money out of politics. And Ben's like, but didn't a billionaire give you a bunch of money to start the Young Turks? And then you're pushing like Bernie Sanders? Isn't that de facto money in politics? Oh, but it's different because it's who you want to push. So that's different. So how would it be any different, right? If a billionaire like Donald Trump's like, I want to invest my own money to win an election, and he's going up against almost every mainstream news that's going, because how do you use money to buy an election? Well, you use it to get your message out there, right? Well, if the network TV and all of these TV stations and all these social media platforms that you primarily use to get your information out there are being ran by the other guys or people that support the other guys, and they're pushing all that shit out of there, if you level the playing field by saying no more money in politics, then whoever those guys are pushing, it's going to be even more powerful. Yeah, Art, right? Yeah, I saw that Scott Adams said that. Isn't it such a coincidence that the one thing Hunter Biden happens to be good at, Art, is also the one thing that you're able to use to launder money really well? If he was a fantastic gardener, he wouldn't be able to do it. Just art. I also saw Scott Adams said, has anyone ever seen Hunter Biden paint? Maybe they have. But I'm going to get another drink. Now, I have to be paying attention because when Hank wakes up, I have to end. And the scandals are so fast. Like, what happened with that Hunter Biden plea deal? That should be, like, the biggest scandal that would occur in a year. That was, like, Friday. We'll have the Devon Archer shit, and they're just biding their time. That's all they're doing. Nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Oh, Trump's indicted. That's what's happening. And then it'll be Trump, 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 Trump. And when you're like, well, wait a minute, I wanted to talk about this Devon Archer stuff, they'll say, oh, that's whataboutism. We're talking about Trump. That's what's going to happen tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump's indicted tomorrow. And then tomorrow on that Kick or Keep show, which, by the way, if you're just tuning in, about 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, I'll be streaming. I'll be doing a show on Destiny's channel called Kick or Keep. It's supposed to be about politics tomorrow. We'll see. But if Trump gets indicted tomorrow, that's all it'll be. And then when I'm like, well, this is distracting from a far bigger story, the current president, they'll say, that's whataboutism. They didn't have shit to say about it when it was occurring. They're just like, come on. Next story, next story. When's Obama going to be, if this testimony of Devon Archer is accurate, when's Obama going to be forced to answer some questions? Ultimately, the quid pro quo required Obama's authority. Yeah, Joe Biden's the one who issued it publicly to them. But if Obama would have said no, it wouldn't have got signed off on. So when's he going to be talked to? Oh, I forgot. He's a secret cow. That's off limits, right? Let me check here my messages. Then I see people like this Kransenstein brothers on Twitter, influencers, Democrat influencer. And they're going to, oh, well, Shokin was never investigating, blah, blah, blah. This guy wouldn't be able to stand 10 minutes of a debate with me on this subject, but they'll get away with it. They will. Because they never have to debate someone like me. I don't have any connections. I'm just a normal guy. Even right-wingers that are bigger than me, most of the time they don't engage with me. So I don't really have access to it. I don't get to go on Tim Pool's show, and when Tim Pool's talking to Destiny about this, and Destiny goes, well, maybe it was just Joe Biden saying that. Maybe it didn't happen. There's not like someone like me that they bring on next week to be like, let me tell you why that's bullshit. That doesn't happen. Sure, Ogre, I'd come on your show someday. It doesn't. So they put out these bullshit talking points. And still, if you go through my timeline today, literally, you should see the shit of people saying, but Trump did collude with Russia. Paul Manafort colluded with Russians. Look how many people on Trump's team were arrested for collusion with Russians. They don't know the first. Everybody knows that Shokin wasn't investigating. We're literally talking about if Devon Archer testified that Zlochevsky said, we want Shokin gone because he's investigating us. And their response to that is, everybody knows Shokin wasn't investigating. Just NPC bullshit. Have I contacted Tim's booker? Is she Sour Patch Lids? I contacted her at one point, but I don't know. Shame is I only live like 3 hours away from Tim Pool, if he's still in West Virginia. But I don't know. But I would love to go down and talk to Tim about all this. Because I've been, right, Sandra's the booker now? No, I don't think I have contacted her then. You know, and here's the thing, right? I've been right on this shit for so long. That's what's so frustrating. I've been talking about this shit in ways no one else was for years, for 4 or 5 years. And now it's all coming to light, and I see all these people now starting to pick up, like lockdowns. I was right on lockdowns in March. I was criticizing Trump when he was virtue signaling to lockdowns, when he was criticizing Brian Kemp in Georgia for not locking down hard enough, and he was criticizing Sweden for not locking down. I criticized him. I got shit on by Trump supporters, which I was a Trump supporter. I was out there saying, can't you see what's going to happen? I was saying things like this. If they intentionally facilitated and cheered on and ignored riots to make the country look bad going into the election, you don't think it's beyond them to play up how bad this virus is? To lock down the economy so the economy's shitty and they win an election? You don't think they'd do that? I think Trump's making a huge mistake. He's going to lose the election because he's going to lock shit down, which will cause so much pain to people, and rightly or wrongly, they're going to blame the president. That's exactly what happened. And I was being told, oh, you're a secret anti-Trumper, blah, 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 blah. I was telling you, fucking on here yelling, screaming my head off about how Bill Barr was covering up corruption and was going through the list of here's how we could have, this is the crimes that we know McCabe committed. Here's the crimes we know Comey committed. Here's the crimes we know that Clapper committed. And Barr's letting them all off the hook. And I was being told by QAnon people in my chat, trust the plan. That's 2019. I was doing all that shit. I don't think that I'm entitled to anything. I don't think that it's like, well, I'm the best and I'm entitled. That's not what I'm saying. What's this about? To you all. Sorry. YouTube's fucked with me for so long. I used to have a playlist of just the Ukrainian stuff. Oh, verify it's me. It's me. Oh, for crying out loud. I'll have to look through some of those old videos. And thanks, wife. My wife says he's still napping. Good. Oh, okay. I'll head down soon, wife, so that you can do that. We're taking Hank to see cop cars and fire trucks tonight, so that should be a lot of fun. Climate change lockdowns, of course. I was like, look, I was arguing with Trump supporters on this website, Above Top Secret. I said, look, if you accept the COVID lockdowns, that's small potatoes. We need to lock down because of COVID, because it could kill tens of thousands of us. Well, what do you think the next logical step is? We need to lock down because of climate change, because it could kill billions of us. And that'll come, and it'll be accepted. And the same, I told people then, I was like, I'm not surprised that big government socialist Democrats were like, yeah, lockdowns. Yep, that's what they want. They like government to have control over your life, so I'm not surprised. You see it over and over again when you interact with these people. That's how they feel. The only time they care about personal autonomy is when it's their right to kill a baby. Other than that, they don't give a shit. My body, my choice, unless we think that you should be forced to take whatever medication we think you should be able to be taken because I feel personally insecure, and then the government has the right to do anything they want to you. That's their policy. That's their motto. So I wasn't surprised that they supported lockdowns, of course. What shocked me was how many conservatives or constitutionalists or Trump supporters supported the lockdowns. And so I argued with many of them on places like Above Top Secret, and I told them, I was like, this is exactly this. And then when I talk to those people, you know what they say now? My bad. Oh, well, moving on. I was wrong. Okay. And you'll be wrong again. You'll be wrong when they do it over the next big thing. You will. They all will. It'll happen. And they'll get away with it. And you're like, no way. People have woken up. Dude, people said they woke up after the Iraq War. Remember, the media came out and was like, our mistake. We'll question the intel agencies. We won't let this happen again. And then not a decade later, they're taking everything they say hook, line, and sinker. Oh, that's great. Who's the most bigoted in chat? We'll just keep the slurs out of the chat because I don't want to be TOS. I don't think that I'm bigoted. Well, I guess we all are to an extent, but I don't give a shit about your skin color, your sexuality, any of that shit. But so, we'll see what happens on this show tomorrow. But that should be 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm looking forward to it because I like debating people. But yeah, I predict nothing productive will come out of it. It'll just be for my entertainment and hopefully your entertainment. But I'm not one of the good ones that the left likes that just sit there, oh yeah, both sides do it, and Trump's bad, and blah, blah, blah. They can't keep up on these things. And the other thing is, with 8 people, it'll be impossible to discuss the specific details of this. It just will be. I mean, and that's even if all 8 of the people are great. It's not necessarily because the 8 people suck or there's certain ones that suck, which there will be. But even if they were all great, it's you can't get into the details of this. Like you see, Pisco calls in the other day. It was a much better conversation than when it was a panel of 4 because we could actually focus on one issue and expand upon it. Seems like a weak argument. Governments need people to work. I don't know what argument you're talking about. By the way, Pisco still can't get around, right? He still can't get around this. He keeps saying my timeline doesn't make sense. I believe this is what he's alleging. Right? Hunter Biden starts working for Burisma around 2014. And almost immediately after that, people in the EU and in the United States, the Obama State Department, start voicing their anger at the prosecution of Burisma, that it's not being done. And this predates Victor Shokin being the prosecutor. Then when Shokin comes on, they continue to voice their concern that the investigation into Burisma is not occurring. And so he says, aha! If that's the case, that they were complaining about this even before Shokin came on, then how doesn't this disprove my allegation or my concern? My concern is as follows. that they were pressuring and meddling in prosecutorial efforts in Ukraine to try to get charges dropped against Burisma. That's my concern, in part because Hunter Biden worked there, a large part of it, but also because there was money being funneled there through all sorts of organizations, including, I would suspect, in the EQ, or the UK and the United States. He says, but if they were complaining before Shokin, no, it does. That disproves this. How does it? All that proves is they wanted the investigation to be investigated by people they could trust to shut it down. When Shokin came in, they were like, oh, before Shokin, they were like, we don't know if we could trust the PGO in Ukraine. Once Shokin was running the PGO in Ukraine, they're like, we don't know if we could trust him. We'd rather it go to people we could trust. Maybe they were worried. They saw evidence that Shokin and his predecessor were investigating, and they didn't like that, which is why they complained the whole time. And how are you going to complain? Are you going to say, we don't like they're investigating Burisma? Of course not. You can't say that. That makes you look bad. So they'll say the opposite. We think these people are corrupt that are investigating. They're not doing a good enough job. That's what they would say. But that's his concern. So he says this is what disproves my theory. So I just articulated to you why that wouldn't disprove my theory. I don't even understand. I can't even almost wrap my head around how you could think that would disprove the theory. If I'm a prosecutor and I'm prosecuting Medieval Mike there, and Medieval Mike says, I don't like that. We're going to pressure, his family starts to pressure to get me fired. And then I get fired and Puck Flicker comes in and he's also pressuring to investigate Medieval Mike. And Mike says, well, we want Puck Flicker fired as well. You can't be like, oh, the idea that Medieval Mike was pushing for that for corrupt reasons is nonsense because he wanted 2 people fired. What are you talking about? Now let's look at Pisco's version of events. As soon as Hunter Biden gets there, they start pressuring that this corrupt Zlochevsky, a Russian oligarch, he's corrupt, and the EU and the UK and the Obama State Department, they all know that he's corrupt and Burisma's corrupt, and that they feel that there's not an adequate investigation of them occurring. And they're so upset about it. Way back in 2014, they're commenting on it. And then they escalate until they finally force the firing of a prosecutor. Now, Pisco has since today cited some evidence, which I don't necessarily believe. Where did the investigation go? Well, it was alleged by the prosecutor that followed Shokin. His name was Lutsenko. It was alleged that the best case went to the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Pisco citing evidence from the Anti-Corruption Action Center that was a Soros-Obama-funded NGO that was actually under criminal investigation for the NABU and then was pressured by the Obama State Department to drop that investigation, which I could provide all the receipts for that. But Kalyunik, or someone who was in charge of that NGO, says actually that's not what happened. Actually, Lutsenko shut down the investigation, not the NABU. Okay, let's accept that. What we know is the same EU, UK, and Obama State Department people that were furious about Burisma not being held to account in 2004, 14, 2015, 2016, when they finally got rid of the prosecutor Shokin that they thought was holding it up that was corrupt, all of a sudden within a year, the investigation stopped. Why wouldn't they still be furious? Wouldn't you even be more furious in that case? So now it's officially closed. Before it was at least open on the books, but you were mad because it wasn't continuing. Now it's closed and you're like, oh, I'm okay with that. And when I asked Pisco this, the only defense he could muster is, well, they didn't say that Burisma was guilty or not. They just wanted a resolution to the investigation. They just wanted a real investigation to happen. Really, that's what they wanted. What's up, Crisco? How's it going, man? Again, what's always made this case worse is that we actually see, we don't have to, like if you were trying to prove this stuff, that it was corrupt, you'd have to prove 2 things. Right? A corrupt quid pro quo, you would have to prove 2 things. I don't know Latin, or I would say the quid and the quo. I don't know if that's really the case, though. You would have to prove on one hand that these people were offering a bribe or something, and then on the other hand, the people getting the bribe or something did what they wanted. There was something offered and that was illicit, and it was accepted and something given in return and that was illicit. Well, we already know that something was given in return. We know there was a quid pro quo. Well, I don't want to say that. We already know that the end game happened, that Shokin was fired, the investigation was buried. So Zlochevsky and Burisma got what they wanted. That part's proven. We don't have to go through the tedious, well, was there a quid pro quo? No, it's all admitted. It's all on tape. We know all of that. Remember, they tried to connect Trump to anything Russia. If he just said, like, well, Putin's not a bad guy, they were like, oh, that means he's a stooge of Vladimir Putin. Imagine that he would have been like, we're forcing the firing of a prosecutor that's looking into Putin banks in, insert country, in India. We're forcing the fire of a prosecutor in India that's looking into Putin-owned banks. What do you think the Democrats would have said? What do you think the media would have said? What do you think the FBI would have said? So that's where we're starting here. And the argument's just, no. That was okay. That quid pro quo was okay because it trust us. Even though it looks like it helped his son, trust us, it didn't. He wanted his son's company investigated harder. That's what we're told. Which makes no sense. But that's what we're told. Then think of all the other things we know. And that's what I say. I say there's a lot of smoke, right? Unlike with Trump, there was never any proof. The best they had of smoke of Trump was when they started spying on Trump, when the FBI started spying on Trump's team. The best they had was, well, Carter Page at one point talked at a university in Russia. And George Papadopoulos one time told an Australian diplomat that some guy said, I'm Russian and we have dirt on Hillary. That's it. They never had any connection whatsoever that Trump did anything. Here's what we have on Biden. We know that he issued this quid pro quo. We know that his son was being paid for all this money through working through Burisma and China and all these places. We know that. And he had no competency to do it. We know that Joe Biden lied when he said, I didn't talk to my son about business deals or anyone. We know that's a lie. We have his business partner, Tony Bobulinski, testifying publicly and to the FBI that the 10% that was going to the big guy was Joe Biden. We have a confidential human source saying that Zlochevsky said that he bribed Joe Biden personally for this quid pro quo. We have the former business associate that just testified, apparently saying that they contacted Hunter Biden to contact Joe Biden and got on the call with him to fire Shokin. And that's what we have now. The FBI has had access to all this information since 2017. Or some of it later. But for years, since at least the 2020 election. And none of that matters. The Tony Bobulinski thing alone. The guy went on television before the 2020 election and said, I'm the business partner of... Imagine if it would have been Trump. Imagine if Trump's business... if Don Jr.'s business partner went on TV and said, here's emails of Don Jr. saying, hey, 10% of this money from this Chinese government business deal I'm doing is going to go to the big guy. And that big guy is Donald Trump himself. Imagine the reaction, what the reaction would have been. But with Tony Bobulinski, he's just like he doesn't exist. Forget about that, they say. All right, I got to get downstairs. So 6 o'clock tomorrow. Let's see if there's anyone to raid. Oh, Sonsul. Oh, boy. All right, we'll raid Sonsul. That's a mistake, but... You think Biden's the best? You'll enjoy Sonsul. Egbert. Consul. Pick on Sonsul about the lab leak thing. That'll be fun. You remember, he was threatening to... It was debunked that it came from a lab. Debunked, he said, years ago. Debunked. How's that claim looking? So, all right, thank you so much, everyone. I will see you tomorrow around 6 p.m. So I'll try to come on like 5:45. So you should see me then. Should be fun. So, all right, thanks so much, everyone. As always, have a good one.
Damn, why does it keep on playing the same fucking songs over and over? Alright, we're just gonna fucking go, okay? Hey, look at it. Speaking of Rob, Wait, hold on. we just got raided by Rob while my first chatter was talking about Rob. How's it going, guys? I was actually because of Caprio here thinking about reaching out to Rob because I don't know what time he streams anymore. Why is the screen black? Well, that's because I was about to switch over to this screen. Wait, why the fuck is my camera off? Son of a bitch. Okay, well, I'm gonna just keep on talking while I try and fix what's going on with my camera. Did it? Oh, Caprio, I thought I was a no by now. You're running and crying to another stream. Okay, Rob. Okay, this is what I was gonna ask because